approximately 10:19, officers from the South Central Patrol Division were dispatched on a disturbance, armed encounter with a man on foot. This call was at 4950 Wadsworth, and that's at the intersection of Great Trinity Forest. Multiple calls indicated a man was firing a weapon. The first arriving officers immediately broadcast the suspect, Mr. Rodney Hodge, R-O-D-N-E-Y, Hodge, H-O-D-G-E. Mr. Hodge is a black male, 10-19 of 80, was armed with a handgun and asked for assistance, code 3. Multiple officers responded and a perimeter was established at the location. Air 1 also arrived on the scene. I'm going to pause here for a second and just kind of describe the location. If you're not familiar with Ledbetter Drive and Great Trinity Forest, they intersect at Wadsworth. Ledbetter is an east-west street and Wadsworth a north-south street. On the northeast corner of the intersection is a bus stop. There's also an apartment complex. There's an iron fence that parallels the parking area of that parking lot for that apartment complex. Citizens are coming and going from that apartment complex. So the officers were taking great care to not only close the streets down, but also direct citizens out of harm's way. For several minutes, Mr. Hodge paced back and forth along a fence. Intermittently, he walked into the roadway of Great Trinity Forest. He also periodically sat, knelt, or laid in a prone position. Throughout, officers issued verbal commands to Mr. Hodge, including the use of PAs. So as I said, there are several officers there. We're doing, not only are the officers dealing with the incident, but they're also directing traffic at that time. So they're using their PAs to also exchange information in their efforts to exchange information with Mr. Hodge. At this time, there's no information developed that Mr. Hodge engaged in dialogue with any of the officers or that his actions were a direct response to the verbal commands the officers were issuing. As I said earlier, this portion of the incident lasted several minutes. The initial call was dispatched at 10:19. The call for shots fired was 11:13. You can see the length of this scenario and how long it lasted. Officers were able to retrieve shields from the South Central substation, and SWAT was requested. SWAT did not arrive on scene. They were heard on the radio prior to the incident concluding, but they were not able to make it on scene. Mr. Hodge began walking westbound on Ledbetter from the location. So not to confuse, Great Trinity Forest is to the east and Ledbetter's to the west. The street changes names right there at Wadsworth. As the officers trailed from a distance using patrol vehicles and shields for cover, they continued to issue verbal commands both by voice and through the PA system as Mr. Hodge walked down the street. They knew him by name, and they were calling out to him by name, and they were offering their assistance to help. Something to the effect, we don't want to hurt you, Mr. Hodge, listen to us, we're going to get you some help, things of that nature. That's not a quote, it's things of that nature. Mr. Hodge turned southbound onto Greencrest. It's about 3 blocks to the west from where the incident initiated. When he turned onto Greencrest Drive, that is a residential area. So you've got single-family homes and duplexes along there. Shortly after he turned onto this street, he pointed his gun directly at citizens who were on a nearby house on the porch. Officers reported that action over the radio. He continued south on Greencrest and it intersects with Lantana Lane. Mr. Hodge turned right, which is westbound onto Lantana. Air 1 and officers on the ground broadcast that Lantana was a cul-de-sac. Mr. Hodge left the roadway and began walking towards a house near the end of the street. The trailing officers stopped and positioned themselves amongst available cover. And let me kind of describe what this available cover is. You've got a street. There are cars parked on both sides of the street, so there's really room for one car to pass down the middle, and there's a little bit of room on either side that the officer could stand. I mentioned earlier that they had their shields. They did have the shields deployed. So as the officers gathered behind the squad cars, the shields, and the other parked vehicles along the roadway there. 2 citizens had sought shelter in a parked car. Those citizens were in this car between the officers and where Mr. Hodge currently was as he walked up towards this house. The officers directed those citizens to get down. Mr. Hodge turned around from near the house where he had walked and began walking directly at the officers with the gun in his hand. Officers gave specific commands for Mr. Hodge to drop the gun. As he continued to advance toward the officers and adjacent to the parked car with the citizens seeking shelter, they fired their weapons. Questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Stephanie.
You said the initial call was at 10:19.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you said at 11:13 the call was shots fired. Is that the initial shots that he was firing in the neighborhood, or was that the shots fired by the officers?
The 1019 was the call from the citizens that they were observing a man firing shots near the bus stop at Wadsworth and Great Trinity Forest. The 1113 is our timeline when the officers discharged their weapons.
How many officers?
There were 3 officers that discharged their weapons. Later on this morning, we'll send you some information with their names and some background stuff.
Did they do anything wrong?
I'm sorry, Stephanie.
Did the officers do anything wrong?
Investigation continues, and that's where we are right now.
Did you say that?
Yeah, Tristan.
Did he, when he was walking toward the officers, did he ever level the gun at them, or did he just?
He advanced on the officers with the gun in his hand,
So
Tristan.
he was just closing the gap.
Yes, sir.
When you say he had advanced on them, what does that mean?
That means he's walking directly at them. The officers had taken a position. Remember, I told you they stopped, and so they maintained that position. He was walking directly at one area amongst all of the officers.
With the gun in his hand?
With the gun in his hand, yes,
and
ma'am.
what kind of gun was it?
It was a handgun. I don't know specifically what model or what caliber.
Was it pointed at one of the officers?
He was walking with the gun in his hand, walking directly at the officers.
How long did he point the gun at the people on the porch?
You know, Tristan, I'm not really sure. I know that I've listened to some of the audio tape, and I've heard that, so that's a question I just don't know the duration. One of the things that we mentioned earlier in the release is that we're reviewing in-dash camera video. None of the involved officers had body cams, so that's eliminated. There were, again, several officers responded. We have a lot of video in which we need to go through. There's video of the incident while it was occurring at Wadsworth and Ledburn and Great 21st, and certainly at the end of the incident.
Is there any chance you're going to release that today?
No, ma'am, no, we will not do that.
Any idea, did Hodge say, or the suspects say anything back to officers at any point?
Sebastian, there's no information at this point that Mr. Hodge engaged officers in any dialogue.
You mentioned that the officers knew him already in the past. Is that? Or
We're still working through how the officers developed information. You know, we're talking almost an hour. And so throughout that hour, they were able to develop information. Phone calls were coming in, and then officers were able to develop information from the field. The specifics and how that was obtained, I don't know yet, but they did have some information about his name.
I don't know if you can answer this succinctly, but he was firing his weapon before the officers even arrived.
That is correct.
Do you know what he was firing at and what he actually shot?
We're still looking at that area of the crime scene. The information that we received early was that he was firing in the air. Sebastian, you have a question? All right. Guys, thank you very much.